There's another side of the predatory behavior in religious spaces that doesn't always make the headlines, but it has quietly drained families, it's broken households, and left people spiritually confused and financially devastated. And that's the manipulation around money. Hey, everybody, it's your girl, Coach G, certified life and wellness coach with a master's in psychology and a PhD in life. This space right here is for us. We're growing, we're healing, we're unlearning and figuring out life without pretending we've got it all together. And today, I want to continue the series PTSD: Patterns, Traditions, Survival, and Deliverance. We've been talking about the patterns and the traditions we've learned, how they place so many people in the mode of survival, and how some of us have been living in that mode for so long that we don't even see it as survival. We call it faith and we see it as obedience. But the reality is, a lot of what we inherited wasn't spiritual at all. We were conditioned through fear and we became devoted to lies. And when you've been taught to survive inside dysfunction, you start believing that dysfunction is normal, and anything trying to point you even remotely towards the truth is hearsay or false teaching. And so when someone says, God said, empty your wallet or your pocketbook, you empty it, no questions asked. You know you have bills to pay. You know you have a car note. Uh, you know that there are other things that's behind. You have a final notice on your light bill, and the only money that you have is the money to cover those things. But you empty it, you empty your purse, you empty your wallet, all because you have been conditioned to believe that if you don't, you won't be blessed. And so you give your last dime. You forget that the scripture says if you don't take care of your own house, you are worse than an infidel. Your mind is clouded, and because you have not studied for yourself, because you've been taught that the leader's word is law, you don't question it. And you end up losing everything and calling it God's will. This is nothing more than fear based giving, the guilt driving offerings, and the threats that God is going to punish you if you don't hand over what you have. This is the part of the conversation people avoid because it exposes something that is very uncomfortable. Not everyone can see the wolf. Not every wolf harms with their hands. Some harm with their words, their influence, and their ability to twist the scriptures into a financial weapon. It's been said that money doesn't change people, it merely unmasks who they are. And the love of money will show you who people really are. For years, many people have been taught that their blessings, their protection, that their salvation is somehow tied into how much money they give. They've been told that if they don't tithe, they're robbing God. They've been warned that if they don't sow a seed, something bad will happen. They've been persuaded to give them money they didn't have, money that should have gone to rent, to groceries, or to their medication, or even to their own children, all because a leader convinced them that God was keeping score. This is what I mean when I say people are trying to survive God. God has never asked you, nor will he ever ask you to survive him. But when you're desperate for hope, when you're desperate for a breakthrough, when you're desperate to feel some relief, you'll cling to anything that sounds like a promise. And that's how spiritual manipulation works. It doesn't start with greed, it starts with your vulnerability. And unfortunately, many people will never hear nor study the truth. And I've been harping on studying for yourself for some time now. Scripture does not teach that God curses you for being broke. It doesn't teach you that your worth is measured by your wallet. It doesn't teach you that your access to God is behind this paywall where you have to pay a certain amount of money to get to him. Somewhere along the way, the message shift from generosity to obligation, from gratitude to guilt, and from stewardship to superstition. And when leaders realized that fear was more profitable than faith, the wolf put on the shepherd's robe and stepped into the pulpit. I have seen financial manipulation be loud, and if they don't get what they want, they become manipulatively arrogant, even threatening in tone to get people to obey. But sometimes they will use subtleties, and these are very prominent. I've seen it more times than I can tell you. They'll tell a somber story at the right moment. They'll have the organist play some or the right type of music. And it's playing in the background, and they're telling this somber story, and your spirit has opened up because of the music, and you become vulnerable. A testimony used as bait, a scripture taken out of context, a promise of a double portion if you give your last. Sometimes they'll manipulate you with the phrase, God told me. And I'm sure many of you have heard this on so many occasions. God told me, this is your moment. Don't miss your blessing. Give your last, give 100, give 500, give 1,000, give 2,000. And you respond not because you're foolish, but because you're hopeful. You want to believe, you want to trust, you want to feel like your sacrifice means something to God. But hope without truth is a trap. And too many people have fallen into that trap. And the psychological impact of this kind of manipulation, it can be detrimental because you begin to associate God with financial anxiety, and you feel guilty for taking care of your own needs and the needs of your family. You get to a place where you feel ashamed when you can't give. And how many people have sat by somebody perhaps that pulled out a $20 bill to put in the offering and they didn't have anything? And so you begin to feel spiritually inferior if you don't meet the church's expectations. And over time, you internalize the belief that your struggles are punishment, that God is disappointed in you, that you're cursed and you're failing spiritually because you're failing financially. And if you don't understand anything else, I want you to understand this. And that is that that's not faith. That's a man made doctrine used by wolves to hoard your hard earned finances for their own personal gain. And the spiritual impact is even worse because when someone ties your relationship with God to your bank account, it distorts your entire understanding of who God is. And instead of seeing him as a provider, you start seeing him as some kind of bill collector. And instead of seeing him as a act of love, you see it as a requirement for survival. And instead of seeing generosity, your giving, as a choice, you now see it as a threat sometimes to your very existence. And when people finally wake up to the manipulation, unfortunately, they don't just walk away from the leader of the church, they walk away from the church, from the scripture. And sometimes they walk away even from God altogether, not because they stopped believing, but because they were taught a version of God that never, ever existed. And this is why financial manipulation is so very dangerous. It doesn't just empty pockets, it empties trust, it empties faith, and ultimately, it empties our souls. And what's even more disheartening is that many of the people who gave the most were the ones who couldn't afford it. They truly gave out of sacrifice. They didn't have a lot, but they were afraid not to give, thinking that if they didn't, it would get even worse for them. You're not supposed to be surviving God, believing that God is going to punish you if you don't give money. That's not shepherding, that's predatory. And when the shepherd becomes the wolf, the flock doesn't just lose money, they lose confidence, hope, they're exhausted, they lose the ability to discern between God's voice and the voice of manipulation. And that's why talking about this matters. That's why personal relationship is so important, because giving should never be coerced. It should never be tied to fear. It should never be used as leverage. God didn't ask the little boy with the 5 fish and the 2 loaves of bread. He didn't ask, or vice versa, I'm not sure which was which, but my point is, he didn't say, "If you don't give it, that you're gonna go hungry, or that you'll never have again." That's not what he did. He didn't coerce him by using fear and manipulation for him to give up his food. True giving comes from wisdom and love. It doesn't come from pressure. It empowers you, not to drain you or have you wonder how you're going to pay a mortgage or put gas in your car or even feed your children. True leadership teaches people how to honor God with their lives, not their wallets. So today, I want you to hear this clearly when I tell you, you are not cursed for keeping your lights on. You are not cursed for feeding your children. You are not cursed for choosing stability over sacrifice. God is not punishing you for being responsible. Matter of fact, He rewards it. And anyone who tells you otherwise, they're not speaking for God. They're speaking for their own pockets, to fulfill their own greed for a 5,000 square foot home or fancy cars, name brand clothing, and a large bank account for their family's vacation. When the shepherd becomes the wolf, the flock needs to learn to protect itself. And part of that protection is reclaiming your understanding of giving, your understanding of the scriptures, and your understanding of God. Because the God who loves you is not waiting to punish you. He's waiting to deliver you. That's it. That's all. Hey, everybody, this is your girl, Coach G, again. And I just want to say if you have tuned in and if you've enjoyed this segment of That's It, That's All, please subscribe, hit the like button, and do leave a comment below. We will be back here again next Wednesday at 6 a.m. when we will conclude our PTSD series. We'll be talking about what deliverance looks like for you post patterns, traditions, and survival. And until then, get out there and conquer the world. And if not the world, conquer yourself. Can we do it?